On this continent, thousands of persons are led to travel north in search of a better life for themselves and for their loved ones, in search of greater opportunity.
Pope Francis made a historic address to Congress this week, and our next guest was there. Acton Institute co-founder, Father Robert Sirico, joins the show. Father, the Pope, in essence, made a moral case for immigration. Is there also a moral case to be made for capitalism?
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, in the same way, by focusing on the anthropology, focusing on the human person. What markets are about are people making decisions. It's not so much the abstractions and fractions and all of that kind of thing, but people making decisions that will benefit themselves and their families. I think sometimes the church doesn't get that with the vibrant compassion for those who are in need. They forget to ask the question of how do we get them out of the situation, and that's what markets tend to answer. I
had Bill McGurn on the show earlier this week, our Main Street columnist, and he made the argument that the Pope may confuse capitalism with collusion. In other words, not fully understanding that capitalism is what brings prosperity and charity to the poor. Do you agree with Bill that that's the misunderstanding?
I think that's one of the great misunderstandings. Another misunderstanding is, so it's a confusion between free markets exchange and crony capitalism, which is, by the way, what the Pope saw in Latin America, what he was enamored of in Latin America. Not that it has done much for Argentina. But I think the other part of the problem is that the church is very resistant to materialism and consumerism, and it confuses consumerism with the need to be able to have things to consume. After all, when you say that people are poor, they don't have access. What is it they don't have access to? Things that they're going to consume. Houses or food or medicine or clothing or healthcare, those kinds of things. So I think it's these kinds of distinctions. It's an ancient church. So it's pre-existed industrialization and real globalized markets by 1,800 years.
Yes,
that memory has to work its way out.
Well, one of the newfangled ideas is, of course, climate change. The Pope has talked a lot about that. We had the encyclical. Is the Pope's concern for humans, for the individual, is that what drives his comments on climate change? Because it doesn't make sense from an economic prosperity point of view.
You know, I think you have just touched on a thing that I think a lot of people have not gotten. With this Pope, it's what's right in front of him. It's that person. You see it when he goes down a line of people. He speaks to this one person. Nothing else exists in the world. This is the man who, when he was elected Pope, called his fellow who gave the newspapers, the journal stand, and
canceled his subscription.
Subscription, and the guy said, well, every month he would bring back 30 rubber bands from the newspapers that we left on his door. This is the kind of man he is. And so I think he does, I'll say, hyper-focus without talking about what markets can do for people, without it being materialism.
Well, I know the Acton Institute does a lot of work on the subject.
We have a whole page on our website on acton.org, and just look up Francis. All of our stuff on there is just, you can just OD on the Pope.
OD on the Pope.
Like New York is doing today.
At acton.org. Father Robert Sirico, thanks very much.
Good to be with you, Mary.